Okay, title of this lecture is the types of fracture and bone matrix. So we're going to start with the other types of fracture. Yesterday or the day before, we basically illustrated that bone fractures can be placed into a couple categories. What were those categories? Simple and compound, and what else? Displaced and non-displaced. Now, there are a number of types of fractures that are really specific to bones and locations. There's like Colles fracture and Potts fracture that are specific to certain bones and bone groups. The ones I'm going to list here are general. The first one is green stick. And if you've ever been in the woods before, first of all, if you haven't, you should. Go to the woods sometime. If you've ever been in the woods, you got to pick up a stick because that's just nature, okay? And if you've ever picked up a stick, you got to snap it in half. And I don't know why, but that's just how it works. But if you ever have one that like recently came off of a tree and you try to break it, what happens is this, okay? It'll snap, but not completely. Like it'll break at the top and then it'll still be connected at the bottom. And that is what a green stick fracture is. Basically, you have a bone that is broken, but not all the way through.
Is this simple or compound?
This, probably is going to be simple.
Okay.
Now, there is the potential for any bone shards to, protrude through bone with any type of these fractures. So, yeah, this looks like it's on fire. That's not what's going on here. It's broken, but not all the way through. There's portions that are still connected. Not broken. Thank you. This is more common in younger people than older people as bones become ossified as we go through development. So young people's bones have a higher percentage of cartilage or proteins versus calcium phosphate. And this is more common in younger folks than in older folks. Then there's one you probably saw in the X-ray lab yesterday. You see this end here doing his thing. And this end here that you can recognize, and the middle kind of looks like a mess, like a firecracker that has way too much power to be sold at a fireworks stand went off in the middle of this. What's the word for that? Common unit is?
Utterly destroyed.
Utterly destroyed, yeah. Shattered. Okay. Who saw a shattered one yesterday? Anybody get a look at the elbow in there in the X-rays yesterday? Yeah, it had like this crazy ladder-looking thing going across it. Yeah, it was completely shattered. So shattered is comminuted. Next one is called a spiral fracture. Most of the time, a spiral fracture will work its way out at an angle like this. Spiral fractures are always caused by...
Would this one be simple or compound?
And again, most of these can be any of those types. You can have a shattered one that is still within the skin. You can have a shattered one that protrudes from the skin. Caused by twisting, yeah. Now, we'll tell you this. Spiral fractures in children in the ER are almost always investigated because they're often sign of abuse. In the radius ulna, the humerus, the femur, if there's spiral fractures, they check into it. Now, sometimes it's not abuse. Sometimes just things happen. Kids do dumb stuff and they get hurt. But a lot of times, if it's caused by twisting, somebody did that twisting. So those are investigated. There's also hairline fractures. Hairline fractures, just like what they sound like. You can barely see them, okay? Barely visible on X-ray. Sometimes they have to move the bones to certain positions. Somebody asked this yesterday. in lab. They're saying, my brother broke his hand, and they made him move it in all kinds of weird ways on the thing where they were taking x-rays of it. Sometimes you have to move it in weird ways just to be able to get it to show up at an angle where the fracture actually shows up. Because you might look at one, it looks like it's lined up there. It's like from this angle, like, oh, it looks great. You turn it this way, like, oh, they're completely separated. And you might have seen that on the x-rays yesterday as well. But hairline's tough to see. All right. Now, I want to talk about types of bones based on shape. So when you see these words, you'll be familiar with them. Most common of all the bones in the body is this one. Long bones. They are, like their description, long and slender. Note that long is relative. That really skinny bone, that really small, really short bone that is the middle phalanx of your little toe is still considered a long bone. And your femur is also a long bone. So basically, if we're able to break it down, it'd be this. Longer than they are wide. Okay? So there's more length than there is width as a long bone. And typically, they're somewhat tube-shaped. So, folks, that would be like that right there, or a better version of it. Okay, so if there's long bones, logically there's going to be what?
Short bones.
Yes. And every bone of your arm, and pretty much every bone of your leg, with the exception of what?
Patella.
Are long bone. That's good, yes. In your leg, the patella is not a long bone. What else is not a long bone in your arm?
Your carpals.
Yes, your carpals in your wrist and your tarsals in your foot are not long bones. They're just like little collections of what looks like rocks. Okay, looks like a tiger paw for some reason. Okay, I'm gonna say this: look like rocks. Yeah. Because they do. Carpal bones, tarsal bones, they take the shape of rocks. All right. In addition to long bones, short bones, we also have flat bones. An example of a flat bone. Scapula is a good example, but I didn't draw that one here. I'm failing at something else right now. Supposed to be on top of your head right there. Oh yeah, this is terrifically failed. Maybe if we put some lines on it. Oh yeah, that doesn't help at all. And curves there and tell you that it's on top of your head and it's a bone. On top of your head. Help. Thank you. A parietal bone is a flat bone. What defines a flat bone is this. It's got roughly parallel surfaces. In other words, its inside surface and its outside surface are close to parallel. Now, they're not straight lines, so your mathematical definition of parallel is going to really hate this description. That's why I said roughly parallel. All right.
And could your like long bones be technically flat bones? Because like the top and bottom are parallel, technically.
Yeah, kind of, except that they do kind of they are cylindrical, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. Then by that description, it would. All right, then it's not that these descriptions were any good, but these just get worse. How's this? Here's the junk drawer. Irregular bones. As if our descriptions were not amorphous enough. Irregular bones. You can see if you can figure out what it is that I'm trying to draw here. It might as well be,
Okay.
because it looks just about as good as if I would have drawn that. Superior view of this thing. Lower back. Anyone?
Oh,
Vertebrae.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
I see
You're
it
like, what
now.
is it? You see it now? All right.
It just started looking like a weapon.
This is a shank.
It's like a
Yeah.
teeth.
All right.
We're teaching you.
Lumbar vertebrae. Actually, I should say vertebra. Vertebra is singular. Vertebrae is plural. Okay. Here's a horrible definition. Weird looking. Doesn't fit the description of other types. Okay. Then it just gets weirder. Sesamoid bones. And if ever I said anything that sounded made up, here it is. These are named what they are because they look like sesame seeds. But that's a fact. It's not made up. Somebody's like, look like sesame seeds. Sesamoid bones. Yep. I'll start with this guy. This guitar pick right here. Who's that? Yeah, that's your patella. Of all the things I've drawn, that's the kind of the closest. Okay. These guys look like sesame seeds. And they develop in tendons as a result of stress. Not like, oh my goodness, I have a test this week stress, but like physical stress. Being pulled over a bone over and over again exerts a stress. All right, here's another example of where you have sesamoid bones. All right, so this is the metatarsal, first metatarsal. At the very end of it, you see these two bumps right here. Those are sesamoid bones that develop in that tendon that attaches to your big toe. The stress of keeping your body balanced and the weight that's put on it by the big toe kind of pulling this back into place over and over again, these bones develop right there as a result of it. They can develop in 26 different locations in your body, and some people have them, other people don't. One of the other common locations for it is right here at the end of your first metacarpal where your thumb attaches. Sometimes you'll have a sesamoid bone develop there. I saw a couple of them in x-rays yesterday. Okay, last one here, it's called a sutural bone. Folks, what's a suture?
Connects two things.
Yes. In bones, what usually does it connect?
The parietal bone.
Yeah, parietal bones or other bones of the skull. So I'm going to draw, this is like a superior view, rotated backwards here. You're looking at, this is the lambdoidal suture, sagittal suture. And sometimes there's a bone there that doesn't really have a name. You know, that's occipital, these are parietal. Who's this guy? That's a sutural bone. They can develop from, remember your skull's not all formed together when you're born. If there's like a little flake of skull in there that's even the size of a grain of sand or so, it can develop in that space there, and then it forms joints. It fills in and forms the joints up against inside of the sutures that already exist. Apologize to our viewers at home. I'm going to show. Well, I can't
Does
show
that
pictures.
Provide a like better or worse?
Not really either. They're just as strong. You know, but in fact, the skulls I have back in lab there's some sutural bones there. I'll show you guys some pictures here as soon as we get done with this video. But if you just type in your Google search sutural bone and click on images, you'll see lots of them from actual skulls. In fact, the first example they give you is one right at the lambdoidal suture there. Okay, couple things and we'll call it a day here. Two types of bone material I'll say bone matrix. If I told you one, you could probably tell me the other. Compact and
Simple.
spongy. Okay, so we'll start with spongy bone. Now, spongy probably conjures up images of a kitchen sponge in your mind, and you think of its flexibility. The only thing it really has in common with the kitchen sponge is that it has a bunch of holes in it. Spongy bone is light. Okay? Has a lot of holes in it. It is surrounded by compact bone, usually only in a small layer. Okay, it is strong in many directions, and it is filled with red marrow. Okay. Now, red marrow is red because of what?
Blood cells.
Blood cells. Red marrow makes all blood cells. Okay, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, all of them are generated in your red bone marrow. And the quantity is just staggering. You have about 25 trillion just red blood cells in your bloodstream. When you donated blood, you donated about 2 trillion of them. Okay? My calculations are correct. It's a million millions is a trillion. Is that right?
Yeah.
Because 1,000 millions is a billion, so a million millions is a trillion. That's a lot of cells. These things are cranking them out. And you'll find it right here. Now, bear in mind, this is not a human bone. This is from a cow, okay? So this is a cow femur. And the greater trochanter I cut off with a hacksaw so you could see this. This is spongy bone, okay? And this would be filled, every one of those spaces would be filled with red marrow, all cranking out blood cells. So that's spongy. It's really, really rigid and it's tough, but you can see the outside edges here is really kind of thick and compact. That is made of compact bone, okay? Compact bone, guess what the first bullet point is going to be here?
Surround spongy bone.
Aha. This one was that.
Heavy.
Oh yeah, it is heavy. It is dense, okay? No holes, okay? It is found at the diaphysis of long bones. It's really only strong in one direction. And guess what it's filled with?
Yellow marrow.
Yep. Yellow marrow doesn't do the same thing. Yellow marrow is responsible for storing minerals and lipids. So it's like some extra storage of minerals and lipids. See if I can flop this bad boy up here so you can see. That is compact bone. That hole's not supposed to be there. This took forever to hacksaw through it. I actually divided up the work between me and a couple of students, and we took turns. It took forever to get through it. It's really, really rigid. It's super strong. But it's really only strong up and down because it's load bearing. It's supposed to bear the weight like that. Okay, so that's the two different types of bony material. Where you'll find, I said this is found at the diaphysis of long bones. Where is this found?
The inside.
What are the ends of bones called? Not the diaphysis. Epiphysis. of long bones and all other types. In all others. So like what we drew the other day, what we drew, seconds ago. I'm a doofus. I was trying to do the old guy thing. The other day is what old people do to hide time. The other day can be anything from yesterday to 60 years ago. Okay. You'll find it inside of this. You'll find it inside of this. You'll find it inside of this. You'll find spongy bone inside of all the other types of bone, but compact surrounding them. Okay. Now, quick question before we close shop today. Which type of bone marrow do they transplant, red or yellow? Red, because it's that they're trying to give people so they can make their own red blood cells, okay? Where do they draw it from?
Humerus. Or the femur. We're talking about the spine.
The hips. They draw it from the pelvis. You have a tremendous quantity of spongy bone in the ilium, and that's where they're able to draw that from for bone marrow transplants. All right.
What does that say on the crack?
Oh, on the epiphysis of long bones and in all others. And that's it for today.